Chris Hayward, who was really one of Jay's top writers, and who had another partner at the time. And Chris created Dudley Do Right, and he wrote a lot of the Rocky and Bullwinkle episodes, and was, generally a pretty hilarious guy. He and I decided that we really didn't want to stay in the animation business forever. I didn't want to be writing for Moose when I was 45 years old. And Chris, who was 10 years older than I, sure didn't want to do it anymore. So we began trying our hand at freelance stuff while we were still working for Jay. And we came up with an idea to do a series about a family of sort of weird offbeat characters that were loosely based, in our minds, on the Charles Addams cartoons that used to be in the New Yorker, the very strange-looking husband and wife, and looked like Peter Lorre and Vampira. We thought that would make an interesting kind of family comedy show. And while not doing the Addams Family, which came later, we came up with this concept called Meet the Munsters, it was called. And we took the idea to a guy who was an agent at a company called Ashley Famous, which became Ashley Steiner, which became it's now ICM through all of its different incarnations. And told him a couple of this particular idea, and which seemed to amuse him. But then he sort of disappeared off our radar screen. We called the agency, and he wasn't there. He wouldn't answer our calls for a while, and then he wasn't there anymore, and we didn't know why, but he disappeared. And then maybe a month or so later, we get a call from this guy. He says, guys, it's Les. Where have you been? He said, well, I got a new job. I'm working at Universal. I'm in charge of comedy development at Universal. And you remember that idea about those monster people? Maybe you'd like to take a shot at that. I said, great, okay. So we would meet with him. We never met with him on the lot, which should have been a clue that everything wasn't going to be on the up and up. We meet in coffee shops and we talk about the story and what we're going to do. And we went back and writing. We knew nothing about writing a half-hour episode, really. And we were just kind of feeling our way. But we had fairly funny stuff. And we'd hand Les our pages, and he'd read them and chuckle and say, well, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So we eventually finished the script, and then we didn't hear anything for a long, long time. And by that point, Chris Hayward and I had gotten an agent who was a lone wolf kind of guy. He called us up one day and he said, hey, they're doing a show. They're doing the Munsters out at Universal. We said, what? He said, look at today's trades. It's just announced. It's starting to shoot in a couple of days, and Norman Abbott, who's a friend of mine, is going to be directing it. And you want to go out and see? We said, well, sure, but we're a little baffled by the whole thing.
I mean, did you have a deal in place?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing. And so Peter picked us up, our agent, Peter picked us up in his Bentley. And we drive out and we go through, get onto the lot and go over to the sound stage and we walk on, and here's the Munsters, as the world became to know it, with the Rat Frankenstein monster and the Bride of Frankenstein and all that stuff, and Dracula as the father and all. And it wasn't at all what we had written and taken in mind, so we knew something was amiss. And Peter goes to the director and says, here's the guys that wrote this. And he says, no, they didn't write this. Norman and what were their names? Two other guys, he said, wrote it. And he showed us the script, and their names were on it. Norm Liebman and Ed Haas. So, and then here comes Les, the producer, or the guy who was the Universal comedy writer guy, sees us, and he doesn't even blink. He goes over and says, hello, introduces us to Norm and Ed. And we're thinking, the guy's got more chutzpah than anybody else in the world. And it turned out he was feeding our ideas to them. They were a couple of staff writers at Universal. And he was feeding our ideas for this to them. Universal decided they wanted to use the characters of Frankenstein and Dracula and all that kind of stuff because they owned it. And they thought it would merchandise very well. Much more than the characters that we had in mind, which were strange but not branded, not literally, and not that broad. I mean, what we did was much subtler than that. And so we went to the Writers Guild.
Now, were you members at this point?
No, because at that point we were still guys just out of animation. We had and we just had an agent. We hadn't written anything to get into the guild with. But we went to the Writers Guild and met with the head of the Writers Guild. His name was Mike Franklin, and we told him what had happened. And he just sort of smiled, just did this little, boy, have I got somebody by the balls kind of look, And he says, let us take care of this. So we had been totally left out. We weren't going to get any credits at all. The Writers Guild went in and must have really busted their chops for what had happened. And we ended up getting a partial credit on it. It was I think it was developed by Norm Liebman and Ed Haas from a format by Allan Burns, or Al Burns, and Chris Hayward. That's the best we could do. We got that, but we got money. That was the main thing. We got money, and it was the money with which I was able to my wife and I were able to buy our first home.